Welcome, and today we're going to discuss Peddle-Preneur's project for the Festival of Change. Now, we were unable to actually have a discussion with Zodwa, the woman who's leading on it, due to problems with her internet. They had power outages that also created instability with the internet, but she sent a lot more information for us, and also there is the presentation that she gave previously. So we're going to discuss her proposal on that basis. So with that in mind, I will ask Lindsey to start giving her thoughts on what impressed her, what were the sort of positives there.
So, I mean, I think this is it's a really thorough analysis of some of the issues facing people in Zodwa's community. And I really liked the way that they have thought through some of the challenges for what I think they describe as the informal entrepreneurs who are currently sort of going around house to house selling various products and services, but are struggling for a range of reasons, to do with, I suppose, lack of support in terms, I mean, she was particularly interesting around the idea that it often relies on the sort of father of the family and what happens if he gets ill, and how can one sort of, I suppose, enable a whole family to trade, how to manage things like insurance, how to move the whole thing sort of up a level in order to tackle some of the I suppose actually dangers really around the very informal economy. So I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was really well thought through, and I think it's very ambitious, which is great. We are talking about systems change, so that's really exciting. And I think the idea of the sort of essentially bikes that are equipped to take cargo and making those available to people in the community as a sort of recognisable scheme definitely has, lots of legs, because, I mean, we've seen it certainly in the UK where, the idea that, things delivered by bikes has become the norm, particularly in cities. And there is a sort of, I suppose, level of endorsement that goes with it being all part of a single scheme. So people build trust, they feel more confident, all of those sorts of things. Particularly like the fact that they've thought quite carefully around, the need for insurance, the need for sort of, I guess, quality at all levels of this, and how to help people with skills training, how to improve food hygiene. There's a lot of really great thought in terms of, a system, I guess, that could significantly tackle some of the problems that are clearly endemic in her community. So I think it's a really impressive, piece of work and set of ideas. And clearly they have some track record. They've clearly have been working with bikes in a variety of ways. So yeah, you get the sort of sense that they know what they're talking about. So yeah, very impressive.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lindsey. Lalit, what were your thoughts on the positives of the proposal?
Well, and she covered quite a lot, quite extensively. Not much is left for me to communicate. I like the idea of, in their given circumstances of local context, and that too now with this pandemic situation, how they are thinking from a livelihood point of view and linking it with the local skill and the reach and mobility. I think the way they are trying to put together, and what is not coming out very clearly, but I believe which is somewhere also one of the very important parameter or element is it is a network. And this network will not only remain at the level of providing a simple or better designed bicycle, but the network will support them to reach out to people. So it has all the possibility of scaling to something very beautiful. And that too in a very relatable scale. So what they are exchanging, what they are proposing, the exchange, they seem to be in a very reasonable, doable community level of exchange possibility. It is not that somebody is being asked to mortgage something very high. People know how to drive, people know how to ride cycles, they can reach out. One of the best thing I liked about, though it is not seen and coming out visible, is the cycle design. So that these cycles, people can use it for the multiple possibilities of carrying their tools, delivery. So I think somewhere the cycle design possibility can really help people to take care of their livelihood requirement from that angle. So how to reach out in a very simple means and empower people. This project carries that message very strongly.
Yes, and I like the way they emphasize the need to engage with the informal potential entrepreneurs and reach out and make sure that this was going to work effectively. So in terms of where they should focus next, because obviously they are at an early stage of development, which is great, and there's lots of potential to go in different ways. Where do you think they should focus? I'll take you, Lalit, first this time. What do you think their priorities should be now?
Perhaps doing a survey and figuring it out. So in terms of livelihood and job market and opportunity, there might be a wide range, right? From the vegetable providing, painting, metal work, plumbing, there could be a wide range. Maybe they choose one or a few sectors, 4 or 5 of them, see which is also more required or in which people are more likely to join the forces with them. And if their cycle design, I think the cycle design has a bit of a key element. If they could work on that, which kind of cycle design, maybe with some modules and attachments. So cycle design will play like the same cycle, which has a possibility of extending it to carry a bit more either load, and you can also use it for display, or you can cover your tools in a particular fashion. So if they work on that and they test it some, so I think some local testing is required for this. Plus, parallelly, I feel they should, we talked about the Bangladesh project of bottle economy, something similar. Something like this has a huge potential in terms of upgrading to some kind of network. So they can do the advertisement for the people, those who join them as their members. So they can reach out, so they can develop the whole local ecosystem with either digital network or some kind of advertisement, by which they could be the one point source. And so they can play that network organizer kind of role, which is much beyond, which is much more, let us say, powerful in a genuine sense to help people empower as compared to only becoming a company or organization which is simply renting out with better cycles. So it is the power of the network which I think they need to tap into and work towards it, just by making themselves a bit more creditable, by testing few things in the next coming months, maybe few cycles. They should test it out and build on that. This is what. Another thing what they may do is, what is not coming out clear, they have their own family members. I find it very amazing that the family members can work together to come out something like enterprise. But if needed, they should be also open to take help, advice, and some kind of joining the forces by other people, those who may be from beyond their family, just to let this business and enterprise grow appropriately. This is what comes to my mind.
Thank you, Lalit. Lindsey, what would you like to add?
Yeah, well, other way, I think Lalit said a lot of it. So I would agree that I think really thinking through, I suppose, how they could envisage this growing, which really gives the opportunity for it to sort of move on quite quickly. I think there's a danger with these types of enterprises that you can spend an awful lot of time very locked in, supporting, maybe the first 10 I think they talked about. And absolutely they need to do some piloting and some testing, but I think it would be really good to do that piloting and testing with a view to the idea that almost if they can get the first 10 set up and sort of working well, then actually what they're doing is creating a network which allows that to be replicated. Because I do think that they could find themselves with quite an interesting problem, that there would be a lot of enthusiasm for this quite quickly. And so really understanding what their role is in a long-term way is definitely something to sort of think about. And I suppose it touches on, there's a comment on in the information we've had around the idea of the entrepreneurs having a share in some ways. So I think working through that idea of, is the idea that an entrepreneur comes into the scheme, they, if you like, pay the regular weekly, monthly fee, and then at some point they actually do have some sort of level of ownership of their bike, or as a local group they have ownership of the local bikes, and then they have more responsibility as a local group to be able to find all the other things that they might do with the bikes without that being just part of the central group, because it's then possible for Zodwa and her colleagues to move on and help others. Because I could see lots of possibilities in terms of things like healthcare and learning and education, and you could see how different groups might want to take this in all sorts of ways that currently isn't what's being talked about, which would be brilliant. But in that case, you need to give local groups the freedom to be able to do that for themselves. So I think thinking that through quite carefully and understanding both, if you like, when they need to be involved and when they need to let go is probably something that's really key to this. I also think I'd be really interested in how they are, I guess, who they're talking to. So I suppose it's the other side of what Lalit was saying in terms of building their networks, because things like, the regulatory, improving food hygiene, insurance, all of those sorts of things, in the end, to make those work, you have to have a partnership with whoever is setting those types of rules in the local area. It's usually some form of local authority. So, actually having the conversations with those in the local authority, getting yourself into a sort of almost preferred supplier relationship with a local authority could be incredibly helpful, not least because it will help the network grow, but also it then means that if you're wanting to access different types of resources, you're working in partnership with some of the public sector, and therefore that bit becomes easier. So I think that notion of that, and then similarly in terms of the private sector and who's supplying the bikes, and what's the cost, and all of those sorts of things, are there ways of building relationships with some companies who are making this type of thing, and as Lalit says, therefore having a sort of constant ability to improve the design, because undoubtedly once they've got a little fleet of these bicycles out there, people are going to be saying, but if only we could change this, change that, improve this, improve that. So trying to have that sort of relationship with whoever's designing and making the bikes would be excellent, and again then becomes a very attractive, I suppose, element in terms of the whole project, and why they would then tend to get other people wanting to come and get involved. So I think it's sort of creating an ecology. I think that's what we're talking about. It's like a little ecology around this, rather than seeing it as a very simple sort of, make something and sell it type enterprise. It feels like more of an ecology, which is excellent. I mean, that's the way to go if you want to make things change and you want to build something that is sustainable, because you'll end up with diverse forms of income, which is, incredibly important in terms of the resilience, long-term resilience of this.
It's interesting. I think it's a really interesting point as to whether they're relating, their relationship is with individual Peddle-Preneurs or with groups. And, because I think there's two different models here, isn't there? One is that they could say, if you get together a set of informal workers as a group, we will provide you with support to set up, if you like, and we'll do the link to the standards and the bikes, etc., but you're responsible for organizing yourselves, etc. Or they have a one-to-one relationship with a set of individuals. My feeling is that the former might be a lot more powerful, particularly actually pragmatically in terms of raising money to start with, because the proposition of raising money for a community to get bikes to support them through the pandemic, that is, in terms of crowdfunding, etc., I think is a much more powerful story, likely to get much more support than them setting up a business and trying to raise money, from on their sort of story. So, and then they're giving power, then they're having groups which have a certain power and say and decide what they do, and they're just providing, they don't have to go into all the detail, they can then self-organize, they're just providing the bikes and the overall framework and the training, and then the rest can be organized at a local level by people who know much more. Also, of course, they then have a group of people who are self-enforcing to make sure that the bikes aren't vandalized and everything else. And the key thing, I think, is maybe they need to find influential people in the informal economy in a group who could be the leaders, who other people will then follow, which they might follow more those sort of people in the community who have a status and people know them, than the the group of dynamic women that, you know, are actually setting up the project.
And there are lots of examples of how that mechanism has worked, you know, around the world. And I agree with you. I do tend to think that relationship with groups is probably easier as well, because I think otherwise it would be very easy to get yourself sucked into, you know, an awful lot of, you know, very detailed, you know, my bike doesn't work, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with that. And that's can be very labor intensive, which is, you know, it's great. Obviously you want to support people, but, you know, as a startup, you need not to drown in sort of just literally trying to support one or two entrepreneurs to do that. I also think that, which is quite interesting, is that, and there's actually examples even from the UK with the recent pandemic, where groups of cyclists have taken it upon themselves to deliver medicines to, you know, people who are shielding this was actually in Bristol, I heard about it. And I think the idea that you might therefore have groups who are less about directly selling services, but are providing services, and potentially they're services that the state will pay for. You also open up the idea that this could be part of the network. So you will have some people who are literally selling vegetables or doing plumbing, but you might well have, I don't know, community nurses, for example, wanting to be part of this in some way. And then that's really important, because then you again have the potential to reach parts of the communities that perhaps you wouldn't otherwise. So again, in terms of raising the visibility, the levels of trust, the idea that this is something very powerful in their community, and that's quite an interesting proposition.
Lalit, what do you think in terms of that two different sort of ways, the individual versus the having a relationship with groups?
So I believe they might have to try with both. So it is very difficult to predict one single way. I see the potential if they have a progressive city government, local government, and I'm sure nowadays with this whole pollution, traffic issues, the idea of using cycles for many of the delivery of services and skills, I think it's a very strong and positive idea and story. So if they could also tap into, and I have been seeing their responses, writing and communication, they seem to be quite apt and quite skillful in articulating their story. So if they read that angle also, that how this is actually going to bring down the carbon footprint of the city, pollution level will come down. And while meeting the basic requirement, you are basically reducing the traffic. Fine. And people, this is one part. So if they can weave that part of the story, which is very genuinely true, if people are getting served by the cycles. Second, they might also consider in terms of design, instead of going a full-fledged, a big design of a new cycle, new product and requirement of the money for that, they might consider designing some attachment which could be put into existing cycles. Because in such a situation, when the pandemic is there, people are tight with the money and the financial flow, they would like a minimum intervention from their side and slightly better income. So low cost interventions for something like this might be better in the first phase. So existing cycles, some attachment, something which could be plugged in, just some stands, things can come easily. They can be covered in case of there is a dust or a rain. They can work out some of those things in their advertisement, stickers and light conditions and all those things can happen. So if they invest on that, that would be, I think, a quite good possibility. So I again get a feeling they need to be, if they are open for it, the future lies in perhaps a network organizer in this case.
Yeah.
They might turn out to be down the line more of using their strength, and they seem to have, if they have thought this much, that already says that they are thinking about a system. So they might have to step up themselves. They might have to themselves pedal up a bit. They might have to pedal up to take and assume a role, maybe slowly, gradually, not immediately, of a network organizer, in which there might be somebody who is perhaps better equipped to design a better cycle and supply to them. So they need not perhaps work on the cycle design and too many things. So they might find a suitable partner, but then their strength is network organizing. So then they are meeting all the requirements. This is what I think the future may lie, and they can do very good job out of this. And also the name suggested, I believe, I don't know, all of them are sisters.
Yes.
Right? It's all female members. So the female members, I think they carry anyway the sense of responsibility, being honest, keeping their promise. So I think it will also have that element if all of them, they maintain that, and maybe they employ or use or give chances to more female members. So the woman empowerment angle will also come. So I think it has all those features, possibility in this story.
And I think your point about their communication, that they, I suppose they need to know where their skill base is, isn't there, and what they can bring. And I think their ability to communicate, which will be key in terms of fundraising, in terms of interacting with government and so forth. So they have a lot of skills that maybe a lot of informal entrepreneurs don't have. But in terms, probably informal entrepreneurs will know a lot more about how you get stuff from one place to another, how the market works, what will work, what they need in terms of the bike, et cetera, et cetera. And as you say, a bike manufacturer is probably going to know more about bikes as well. So, but I think that the other element actually for them working with groups in terms of having a network with the sort of hubs and a lot of hubs is that also in terms of communicating and collaborating, it's probably a lot easier to do that with a number of groups in different places. Yeah. And also they've got a model that I suppose that's relatively easy, I think a lot easier to scale, isn't it, than a lot of individual relationships.
For that, my point was, there is always a very fine line between, there would be a threshold line between carrying out your idea vision with your own dedicated group and joining the hands with many existing groups. There is always a bit of a give and take, which could work both ways. So somebody has to take a call with their own experience and some sense of adventure also. Sometimes what happens depends which kind of group we are talking. If there are already existing groups which are powerful, both economically, politically, they might sideline you, or they will have a stronger negotiating term. So then your whole idea, empowerment might get subsided. So you have to be careful, and sometimes maybe you have to be daring enough, courageous enough. If people are not providing you supportive energy, if you think you are not being supported, have the courage to go ahead and test it, even if on a small scale. So I think it's a part of learning cycle. It's a living and learning together. So it can work both ways. So maybe they should have some kind of mentor, supportive mentor who can be like-minded to them, those who can advise them on these things. Now you go ahead on your own. If this person or group is not willing to join hand, let us try it and test it out. And somewhere you might persist a bit more. Let us try to join the group. So that sense will come when you walk.
All right. Well, I think we've had hopefully that's been useful. Any last thoughts, Lindsey, before?
Not really. I mean, I think, they're obviously clearly very energetic, and, that's brilliant. They've got a long way. And, I think, as you said at the beginning, Henry, without being there on the ground, it's quite difficult to know which really is the place to start. So I suppose, I think, hopefully our comments have been useful, but in the end, they just need to sort of plow on and, and keep going and keep being determined and resilient, and, try not to sort of get downhearted when the bits that don't work. I think we've probably all been in the situation where you sort of think, oh no, but actually, with hindsight, those are the things you learn most from. So I'd say keep trying, keep going, keep moving forward. It's, a fantastic idea and hugely worthwhile and of its time. I mean, Lalit said, it is absolutely plays to all the environmental concerns that we all share. So I think it's great. I think it's, keep at it would be my final words.
Thank you, Lindsey. And Lalit, your final word?
Something similar. Idea is absolutely brilliant, very contextual, very empowering. So idea has everything of the right ingredients in it. So like they say, on the other thing, you need to also test yourself by walking your talk. In this case, they need to cycle, they need to pedal their project. It is as simple as that. So they should feel empowered, positive, and really work at it. So I think in that way, I would say full support, energetically, good wishes or anything if they want to get in touch, anything. So with all positivity, I also wish them all the best, and they must test and try it out. That would be really great.
Brilliant. Test and try. Well, thank you very much, Lindsey. Thank you very much, Lalit, and good luck. I think it's a great idea too, and really all strength and power to you to keep going on challenging. These are always challenging roads, as we all know, to pedal them. Okay, thanks very much.